I'm Bec Talia, and this is the Primal Alternative podcast.
Yay, Bec. It's so good to have you here. And before we dive into all the juicy questions I've got lined up for you, please do start with what you had for breakfast.
Oh, I love this question because I love talking about food, and breakfast is actually my most favorite meal of all. So this morning I had scrambled eggs made with some 24-hour sour cream, a little bit of dill, some veggies like zucchini, tomato. I think I popped in there this morning, a little bit of silver beet. And I had that. That was my breakfast, plus some ginger tea.
Oh, yummy. That sounds very delicious. Very good. And
Yeah,
I'm
I've
so
got
stoked.
this thing about dill. Sorry.
Yeah, you got it growing in your garden?
Yeah. At the moment, it's like wildfire.
Nice.
Mm.
Well, I was really excited to get you on the podcast because you've been really instrumental on a recent health journey that I have been on, which was curing some eczema. I'll get into the root cause of the eczema, which has been such an amazing journey. Still on it, of course. Have kept all of
Yep.
the healing tools that you and Elyse taught me with the Well Belly protocol. And so I wanted to get you onto the show just to share some of your amazing wisdom. So my first question to jump in with, Bec, is your extensive experience in this natural health industry, particularly focusing on gut health, food intolerances, and the gut-skin connection. Can you share some practical tips or advice for our listeners to improve their gut health and overall well-being with dietary changes?
Yeah, absolutely. And dietary change is a really good way to start when we're looking at gut health. I know there's a lot of information out there about different vitamins, minerals, herbs, nutrients, probiotics, and they're all wonderful and really, really helpful. But at the end of the day, if you've got things that you can do with your diet, you have those tools forever. And they're really fantastic things to have in your tool belt or, under your hat, basically, to be able to help to manage different aspects of your gut health as well. Probably my biggest practical tip for people is to just go one step at a time. It can be really, really, I suppose, for some people, they get very excited when we start working together. And it's like, yes, give me all the things. And then they end up completely overwhelmed and unable to move on any of the different, suggestions we might make. So just simplify it, take a breath, and just implement one thing at a time. And that may be changing your breakfast to something that's more gut friendly. It can be looking at your snacks. It could be even just removing some foods that may not be particularly useful for you as well. So that's probably my biggest tip, is to take it slow and do whatever is your natural next step. So when you look at, when I usually see somebody come in to see me at the clinic, I'll generally look at their daily diet. And I do encourage people to be as truthful as possible. There is no judgment when, we're looking at people's diet. I know a lot of people are sort of like, oh gosh, you've got to look at it and think that I don't eat well. That's not at all how I'm viewing your dietary bits and pieces. What I'm looking for is what's your natural next step of changing to something that's going to suit you a little bit better. Generally speaking, I'll usually start with breakfast, actually, because it's a really easy one for people to change. And sort of, I suppose, the typical Australian diet is that we have, or people have cereal or toast. Toast and Vegemite is pretty stock standard kind of foods for breakfast. So I like people to move towards a protein forward breakfast. So that would be to include something with some sort of protein in it, be it eggs or meat or fish, and remove the cereal, pop in something with eggs in it. So that's a really easy kind of step for people to take, which takes you a step away from processed foods or non-whole foods and a step towards something that's going to sustain you, make sure you're not hungry, and give you lots of fantastic nutrients that your body can use for all sorts of different things, including gut healing as well.
You
So that's
mentioned
probably
that,
my big practical tips.
yeah. And you mentioned about removing some foods and obviously getting rid of the toast and Vegemite's one of them. What are some of the other common things that you think might be better avoided?
Yeah. Look, whenever we're looking at gut health, definitely processed foods and foods that have different additives and colorings, flavorings, preservatives, those sorts of things I really want out of the diet. It's not just for gut health either. It's usually for all over well-being. That's not a bad thing to avoid, full stop. So that would be one of the things that I'd actively get people to take out. So unfortunately these days, commercial breads and things like that, apart from, I suppose, the aspect that gluten can be a problem for people, or what's actually the ingredients can sometimes be an issue, they'll often contain stabilizers, emulsifiers, preservatives and things like that in there, let alone breakfast cereals, which is a whole other kettle of fish really as well, unless you're making your own or getting something that's really, really good for you. I know that you've got your hands, your hands all over that. You know how to do that. But yeah, it's that would be probably one of the biggest things around removing those sorts of foods. When we dive in a little bit deeper, and I'm a GAPS practitioner, and so one of the aspects of the GAPS diet is we actually tend to remove all grains and starches, because if people have compromised gut health, that can be really difficult for their guts to be able to handle as well. I like to liken it to if someone's got a really red inflamed area and you're rubbing sandpaper over it, basically, by adding in these fibers sometimes. So moving away from that can actually really help to take a bit of the load off the digestive system, so it can not have something that's irritating it in there for a long period of time as well.
That's a great analogy, because it really does feel like that as well, doesn't it? And when you take them out, what a difference. It's it's like night and day, really. I always think of it as like twigs, that like, if you think about twigs and your gut lining, which is so thin, just kind of like roaming around and irritating it and poking little holes through it. Who wants that?
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, exactly that, twigs, or you've got a fire in there and you don't want to keep feeding that fire with different things too. You want to kind of let that reduce and see what's going on underneath as well. And that's where taking those foods out, I think, are really helpful.
And is that an easy one for people to do, or do you get a bit of pushback with that?
A lot of pushback, especially if people so I do find that if people know a little bit about GAPS diet before they speak to me, they're pretty much already on board with the idea that these things will be removed from the diet. But I do still have people say to me, really? Do I really have to do it? I'm like, well, you essentially don't have to do anything, but my best recommendation is that, yes, you do. You will feel better with it. And it's surprising, actually, when people do start to feel better with it, they go, wow, why didn't I do this before? Like, it's a really, really interesting thing that happens, because often people feel really unwell with these foods in their diet.
But you don't know anything. You don't know any different, and then you're just feeling so rubbish that it kind of feels really too hard to make a change. Like, I know I've been there. It's a horrible place to be, but can be so rewarding if you can make those changes. Now, Bec, you mentioned GAPS when you were just talking to us. Then, can you tell us a little bit about how the gut and psychology syndrome, or GAPS, approach has influenced your practice, and how it can benefit people dealing with conditions like anxiety and OCD?
Yeah, and look, I can speak personally about this as well, because this is something that I have suffered with, or had suffered with, for quite some time as well. And it was quite incredible. I quite really wanted to learn how to do the GAPS diet for a really long time before I actually did it as well. It just took a bit of percolating in the back of my mind for a period of time before I went, yes, this is the path I want to go down. And for me, I suffered from very high anxiety for most of my adult life, which definitely got significantly worse since the birth of my son. He's 11 now. And I have OCD-like tendencies where I would have to touch things 3 times, make sure the door was locked 3 times, make sure the kettle was off 3 times. And it used to take me a really long time to leave the house. And there'd be a lot of double checking of things, or triple checking of things, really, for me. And those were my behaviors. Being a naturopath I've been a naturopath for now 20 years, which is going to show my age definitely, but 20 years I've been in the industry, and I've managed my symptoms with herbs. I've with supplements before. I have removed gluten from my diet probably a good solid 10 to 15 years ago now as well. And all those things helped, but nothing seemed to really get to that root cause. That so I'd wake up in the middle of the night with intrusive thoughts and not be able to sleep, and racing heart, and just almost to the point where I was not able to do what I needed to do in the day. Like, I just couldn't function with that there. It would take me so long to get things done and double and triple check. And when you become a GAPS practitioner, they make you do the GAPS intro diet. So there's 2 parts of the GAPS diet. There's full GAPS and there's intro. And intro is a very pared down diet where we take a lot of different foods out, like starches and your grains, but we add in really nutrient dense healing foods in. And by the 3rd week of being on the intro diet, I completely disappeared. My OCD type tendencies and my anxiety was virtually at nil, and that had never happened in my entire life before. So for me, it was a profound experience. I know that sounds really quite a bit zealous, but very profound experience doing the GAPS diet. And now I've seen this with clients time and time again, things you would never sometimes even think would be connected to gut health. they make these dietary changes and they move through the process and things will resolve. So people don't often think of anxiety, I think, or OCD as being related to the gut, which is why I sort of talk about it a little bit more, because those things do have quite strong links to what's happening in our digestive system.
Yeah, well, I can vouch for it as well. I know that anxiety and depression, not really like a down in the dumps, but just like, what's the point? Feeling like, what's the point? Just feeling like getting so overwhelmed just with like day-to-day simple tasks like laundry and cooking dinner. Like that was about as much as I could cope with. And you just think, well, and now when you now look at what, you couldn't even function during the day. You couldn't leave the house without triple checking everything. And now you've gone on to do what you do, helping other people. You can turn it around. You can get out of that and go on and live a great life and help other people. And when you've had that profound experience yourself, it is almost like I don't know, like you get sort of this self-transcendence thing, don't you? Really, like, oh my goodness, I've got to help other people with this. This is amazing. It's life-changing and it's great. I love what you do. And yeah. And it's great that you've actually had that experience, because otherwise, you wouldn't be able to relate to your clients and help them on their journey as well. Very cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very, very cool. So I'm really curious about your perspective on the relationship between food and mental health. So given your expertise in anxiety and OCD, how can specific dietary changes positively impact these conditions? And you did touch on herbs a little bit as well. And, I'm the same as you, like spent hundreds and hundreds of dollars getting herbs, and you take them and these revolting tasting tonics and supplements. And that's great, but you kind of run out or you forget to take them. Whereas, food is wonderful, but herbs can help as well. So what kind of supporting role do they play in mental well-being, Bec?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're wonderful as something to be able to prop people up largely. So if you're, say, low mood or low motivation, potentially you might need some B vitamins. Just an example out there, and I know this isn't a herb, it's more of a nutrient there, but potentially you might need some B vitamins. And those B vitamins, improve your energy and help you to feel better. But then what we want to be doing underneath is working on the diet to increase the amount of foods that might contain those things in there, or working out why your B vitamins aren't being absorbed well, utilized well, or I suppose your body's not taking them in as we would normally expect, or maybe you're using up more of them than you should be. Then herbs are very similar too. So herbs can gently nudge and gently support like the nervous system, and it can support your adrenals, because they play a bit of a part, particularly in anxiety type states. And even supporting, I suppose, brain function as well is a really big part when we're looking at things like anxiety and OCD. They'll help to downregulate inflammation, and it depends on the herb. So turmeric's a good example. It's an anti-inflammatory herb, can have anti-inflammatory properties, and often that's used in high anxiety states with people as well, because it just helps to bring down any inflammation that might be behind that as well. So they're all great. But then if you work on the dietary side of things, and, I suppose inflammation is a really good example. We want our diets to not be pro-inflammatory, so not to have foods that are going to drive inflammation in our bodies. We would much rather them to be anti-inflammatory. So making sure that, you've got lots of fruits and vegetables are a really good example. Taking out grains is, as we spoke about before, is part of that, because for a lot of people, grains can be inflammatory. And it can drive a lot of the symptoms like anxiety and even OCD type of pictures as well for some people. So I suppose, I don't know if I've completely gone off topic with the question. I was getting very excited there, and I've gone off on a tangent a little bit, I think.
What was the question again? I don't know. I was listening. It was very interesting. I was hanging on every word. It was more about, the herbs and the supporting role in mental well-being.
Yeah. So we're looking at supporting really while we're doing any sort of root cause work underneath. So finding out why this is there for someone and what kinds of things we can pop in place, so that then when we don't need the supplements anymore, forget to take them, just get a bit over supplementation full stop, because that can happen as well. You've got things that are propping you up and supporting you underneath with lots of the time dietary and lifestyle work.
Yeah. And it really is like, what a difference. Like I've always been a little bit like this with gaps. I think a little bit like, oh no, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. I don't have to go down that route. But what I did full gaps, didn't have to go too far, because I've done a lot of work on the food side of things. But it was more for me bringing in the healing foods, like making meat stock more of a like an everyday thing, and getting more of the egg yolks in, and all the digestive things, you know, like the kvass and the boiled beetroots in apple cider vinegar and the apple cider vinegar and the lemon juice and the kefir. Like, it's just so many things. You know, you feel like, oh, I didn't really make much changes to how I was eating. It was still kind of like meat and veg, cut out potatoes completely. Yeah, but then it was that bringing in those different foods, which that really fills your plate. You don't feel like, you know, it's so colorful and pretty on purples and sauerkrauts and all sorts of things, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what a
You don't
difference.
feel like you're missing out.
Yeah, you don't feel like you're missing out. And what a difference that is that's so sustainable. It's just easy to do versus, you know, I've been in some circumstances where I've been taking like up to 13 different supplements a day.
Yeah.
And you're just like they're chugging all these tablets down, and it's just not, I don't know, like I don't know, maybe it helped a little bit, but it didn't feel like it got to the root cause. So I really do love the food as medicine and get into that root cause. And it's amazing when you support your body like that, what it can achieve by itself. It's amazing.
Yeah, it never fails to amaze me. What sort of a couple of changes to, like you said, adding things in generally to the diet, and then you get these amazing changes in people, and it's like, wow. And all you've done, like, essentially you've added meat stocks, one of our healing foods. You've added in some meat stock of fermented foods, and the changes we could go adjust. Yeah, absolutely incredible.
But then, you know, you didn't have to give up all your favorite things either. No, you still had a bit of coffee in there, still had a glass of wine in there. You know, which is great, and this is doable.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Which is awesome.
100%.
So it's funny because, you know, I've worked with you, and then I was actually doing some research, doing some pod pitches, trying to get myself onto new podcasts, and up popped you. I was like,
yes,
how funny that you've got your Natural Mama podcast, and you've had the opportunity to educate diverse audiences from parents to corporate groups. So how do you adapt that message? Because I would imagine it's a lot easier to kind of like share a message with somebody who's on board, you know, like a mum versus like a hubby who are sometimes a little bit hard to convince. So what are like your tips for addressing different audiences, and what are some of the most common misconceptions that you encounter that you feel are worth mentioning?
Yes, definitely. Well, there's quite a few misconceptions, but I'll leave that part to the end. I guess I just want to make it healthy eating and dietary changes accessible to people as possible. So I'll always talk about building blocks usually to people, and that's really depends on whether or not, say, if you're talking to a mum or a family or a woman, we'll be talking about building blocks that might underpin their particular concern that they've come in for. And if you get people that are a little bit more resistant, I tend to often refer to research, because there is a lot of research to back up the different things that we're saying as well. And to see that, especially when it comes to gut health, there's been an explosion in research. Sometimes people are like, one of the things I often get said is, oh, you're a naturopath. Oh, I believe in science. Well, yep, that's great. I do. I've got a science degree as well. And so often that's one way I might combat that, and sort of talk about the research and the different things that are coming up. And this is things that are accessible for people if they want to go and have a bit of a check that I'm telling them what's really what, or whether or not I'm just sort of making up stuff as I go along. So often when people are a little bit resistant, I do sort of talk about things that might be being looked at in a more scientific way, and that can sometimes help people to be a little bit more on board. I often need to reassure people that I'm not going to take away all their favorite foods as well. That's usually a big one to sort of get people on board too. Got to add things in, not necessarily take them away just yet, but yeah, you see how you feel, those sorts of things. So I will I suppose cater depending on what's sitting in front of me. So what symptoms the people are experiencing. So if it is a skin condition, that can really impact on how people feel, can really impact on confidence. So talking about, I suppose, the different building blocks we need for skin and how we're going to drop inflammation. And in the case of eczema, which we were talking about before as well, that would be something that I would start with, even if people are a little bit reluctant, even if they give it 1 or 2 weeks, just make a little change and see how you feel about it. See if you're noticing a difference there. And that can often, once we sort of start to see some changes or people start to feel a bit better, that makes a big difference as well to how they feel about all the different things I would be suggesting for them too.
Yeah, I always like that like N equals 1, like be your own, test on yourself, be your own experiment. And I think that, like, when I first found out about grain free, I couldn't think of anything more like obscure and crazy based on the way that we've been, you know, socialized in terms of having 13 serves of grain products a day. I just thought it was absolutely crazy. But then when you have that, like, you know, that profound moment that you explained, and for me it was like a veil had lifted, and suddenly, you know, you suddenly feel amazing, and the colors are brighter, and the music on the radio sounds amazing, and you suddenly get your joie de vivre back, you know, your reason for being. And I think, you know, when you've had that experience, it doesn't matter what the science says. When you felt it yourself, you know you're on the right track, right?
Absolutely. And I think you have, for, you know, sorry for the pun, a real gut feeling. Sorry, I love puns. I know, right? About what is working for you and what's not. So it's funny actually, because I'll often say, people say to me, oh, I'd love cheese, I love dairy, I love milk and all of that. And then a little bit later, be like, but I think that's the issue. So they've already kind of got an understanding of what's happening. All right, then this is the reasons why I think it might be an issue. And then sort of talk to them about taking it out for a short period of time just to see how it goes. And often you're right, once that veil's lifted and people are feeling better, you know, it's such a, once they know what the other side looks like, I think too.
And it doesn't need to be really like motivating. I sort of thought it was going to be like a kind of 2-year slog or something, and it doesn't need to be. Like, I saw results in the first week. I was like, oh my goodness. And I was posting like pictures of my arm being completely red raw with eczema, and then the week later it was so much better. And then it just kind of like petered out. It still gets like a tiny bit. Like if I've got a change in hormones, if I'm getting my period or something, or if I've been like super stressed, it'll just go beep, 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 beep. Don't forget, I could still be here. Keep looking after yourself. And then it goes away again. But this is going to be the first year in 2 years, Bec, that, you know, it's summer. I don't need to worry about wearing sleeveless dresses or, like, you know, going for a swim in the ocean and getting all salty, and salty eczema is not nice. And, you know, so just amazing. So I'm
so
stoked.
amazing.
Yeah, I'm really stoked. It's so cool.
And I remember seeing your pictures coming up on social media as well, and it was just like, just incredible. Like you said, such small things, and then I see these big changes. It's quite amazing.
Yeah, the root cause, which for me was as Elyse would describe it, a blocked sink, which is a congested liver, which is not surprising after nearly 50 years on the planet of everything in the world. So unblock the sink and off we go. So that was fun. I think we're gonna get Elyse on the podcast actually to talk about detoxing and unblocking sinks, because that's quite an interesting conversation.
And she's very good at explaining it really, really well.
She is. I think that might be a good one for after Christmas, when people feel like their sinks need unblocking.
Yeah. That's it. There's definitely a clog there.
So have you got any other, I'm quite interested in these, like, other common misconceptions that people have, like any other ones?
Yeah, definitely I get a bit of the I believe in science thing. That's probably the biggest misconception, which I think is always really interesting. And then I get people asking me if I'm going to make them eat rabbit food. So that's another thing as well, a lot of the time. And I'm like, well, yes, in part because vegetables are good for you, but also, you know, you can still have your meat, and, you know, you can still have fruits, and there's still fun in food. I think that's the idea, is that we're a bit of fun killers, I think, when it comes to food. So you're taking away all the things that I like, so there's nothing I can enjoy, you know. We're the fun police, and that's a huge misconception, both in the naturopathic world, I think, and in the GAPS world, whenever you're working with dietary stuff, I think. So people are sort of already going, well, you're going to take away my coffee, and you're going to, you know, make me just eat vegetables all day, and, you know, everything's going to be bland and tasteless, and I'm going to be so bored. And you sort of have to talk people with it and go, no, you know, these things are actually really delicious. You've just got to try them and see how you go. I promise I won't take away your coffee at the moment. Like, don't worry. And if I do, I'll slowly, step by step, take you there, but you don't have to give it up. And not forever if you don't want to. So yeah, I think that's probably another one of the big misconceptions. And it's really funny because often we'll do like meat stock challenges and 10-day meat stock challenges and things like that as part of the clinic. Meat stock's actually delicious to drink. Like, it makes up the basis of soups and casseroles and stews and gravies and all sorts of wonderful things. It's a really actually quite a nice thing to have, but there's this big perception that it's going to just taste like watery meat, like meat water. Sorry, meat water. That's what I'm thinking of there. So yeah, when people actually start to drink it, they go, oh my gosh, it's so nice. I'm like,
There you go.
It's
Told
lovely.
you so.
Go for it. Yeah. And beetroots are good. So we're going to pop those in next and, those sorts of things too. So like you said, on the plate, there's lots of color. It's interesting. There's, foods you actually want to eat in there. Things that really kind of get your mouth watering. You're like, oh, delicious. I'd really like to try that. That will be the basis of your meals. They won't sort of be bland, boring and only full of Brussels sprouts and kale.
Yeah. And if you come, like, if you think about like grain foods, like bread, crackers, that kind of thing, that is cardboard. It's very tasteless. It's very bland. And then when you move away from grains and starches and move more towards fats and proteins, that's so much more tasty. Like a steak with butter on, broccoli with butter on, or something cooked in ghee. You're just like, are you kidding me? This is just delicious. And you don't need a lot. I find that we're buying less food because you've got so many, like we call it condiments. Do you want condiments? And there you got your kraut, you've got your beetroot, and then you've got your 24-hour sour cream that you have a blob of that on, and really all you need is a bit of protein and a few veggies, and there's a meal without much effort at all.
And once you've done the initial sort of cooking, like, or making kraut or doing the ferments, it's actually not to it. You can throw together a really good meal really quickly with all those sorts of bits and pieces as well. I do find that. I think as you move to more nutrient dense foods, things like the breads and the crackers and things like that, are just not as full of nutrients as your proteins and your fats and things like that. Once you move to more nutrient dense food, you find that you don't need as much. Usually you may feel fuller earlier than what you would normally do, and you do feel a lot better once you've eaten too. Less bloating, less feeling heavy in the gut. It's such a big change for people when they do move to those more nutrient dense foods. It's really exciting.
It is so exciting. All right, so final question for you, Bec, is in your practice you've been focusing on supporting people with food intolerances. So can you elaborate a bit on the challenges that people face with food intolerances and share some practical tips you found effective to help your clients manage intolerances while still enjoying, we kind of talked a little bit about this, still enjoying a varied and satisfying diet? Because people, like, it's human nature that we hate deprivation. Like, if as soon as you tell yourself, I can't have chocolate or wine or any of life's joys, it's all you can think about.
That's right. I know. It's just that thing where you go hot chips, hot chips, hot chips, hot chips, over and over. Oh yes, that's happened to me before. Well, I've been working with food intolerances for quite some time, even before I worked as a GAPS practitioner as well. I used to say it was my gluten-free, dairy-free butter and bread. Really, I'd see people with intolerances and we would work on gut health to kind of support them through it. So looking at your gut health is a really fundamental part of working with food intolerances, because when your gut is working better, then sometimes you can tolerate foods that you wouldn't necessarily have been able to tolerate before. And just making a distinction between allergy, which is very different, to intolerances there as well. So that's something to keep in mind. But what I do find that most people with intolerances struggle with is the loss of social connection through meals, shared meals and things like that. So they're not necessarily able to go out with friends, or they might feel like it's too difficult to go out with friends if they have a number of food intolerances, or eating at families' houses becomes quite difficult as well. And it can be really isolating for people. So looking to address that, I think, is a really important thing for not only their physical well-being, but also their social and mental well-being as well. And that all is very much interconnected, or it's a holistic way, I suppose, of looking at what's happening for people too. So I would tend to, when you're looking at food intolerances, give tips to people, like if they do happen to eat out, there's usually foods that they can eat. It's just knowing what to choose or knowing what to ask for. If they have to call the restaurant or cafe or friend or family's house ahead and just say, look, I can't really eat these things. Do you mind if I bring something along? Or, there's lots of different options there. So understanding what they can eat is a really important thing, because often when they see different practitioners around intolerance, it's always what you can't eat. So don't touch gluten, and that now means bread, pasta, crackers, sauces, seasoning on chips, you name it, all sorts of
it's an
ice cream. I know.
Crazy.
Can you believe it? So as I said, they walk out going, well, that's awesome, but what can I eat? So actually offering some really great alternatives, I think, is really important. So they know what they are able to eat, and then they can make choices based off that is really important. And I think that also just having an understanding, or having someone that they can speak to that has an understanding of what these food intolerances might mean for them. Because there is, and I see this on the internet a lot, where people go, oh, I just wanted to check if you still have the intolerance and then feed the food to the person who has the intolerance, and they feel quite ill. So I think just having support, good support network, and people who can talk, or help talk through these kinds of things with you or want to listen to you is a really important part as well of just being able to deal with intolerances on a day-to-day basis. But generally speaking, working out what the root cause of your intolerance might be goes a long way to kind of really support and try and, I suppose, resolve some of those issues that you might have with foods. So if you had, for example, leaky gut, which is when our intestinal barrier, which is one cell layer thick, each cell should sit next to each other nice and tight, held together by something called tight junctions. And that's a semi-permeable membrane. So water and nutrients can move through one way, but it stops anything else or things that we don't want moving across. If that barrier becomes leaky, hence the leaky gut name, then things cross that barrier that shouldn't, and our body goes, hang on a second, you don't belong there, and we'll often have a response to where you don't feel very well. You might get bloated, feeling really fatigued after eating. Brain fog is another big one that comes up with food intolerances a lot of the time. And I myself, if I eat anything that has gluten in it, I could fall asleep straight after it, and I just struggle to think. It's like thinking through cotton wool, like this in my brain. I can't get out. Those sorts of things can often be very helped along by addressing that leaky gut side of things. So looking at the gut health, making sure that barrier is nice and strong, having the building blocks for those barriers as well, and supporting our good bacteria, our good, healthy microbiome as well. So that's, I suppose, the area that I would be looking at when looking at those sorts of intolerances as well. I feel like I've left something out of that question, so I'm just going to check.
I think you covered it really well. It's like, what challenges are people facing? What can they do about it? And make sure that they're still enjoying a varied and yummy diet.
Yeah. Basically talk to people. If you're not sure what to eat, there's always an alternative. And look for things like gluten, and if people have gluten intolerances, and there's a large number of the population that do, meat and vegetables and fruit are all naturally gluten-free. So you don't have to worry about, those sorts of things being on your plate as well. And again, there's lots of color, there's lots of variation. So just finding things that you enjoy that aren't going to flare you up is a really big part of that too.
Yeah. And I always find that because I have a group of friends and we've all got different problems. So I'm like paleo, primal, and I have a friend who's celiac, and I have a friend who is a dairy-free vegetarian. So she's not a vegan because she eats eggs, but so that's quite a broad spectrum of weirdos, right? But we can get together. I swear down, this is the most tasty food we ever eat. We all get together every 6 weeks. We have curry club, and everyone cooks a curry. There's rice, right? Because that's gluten-free. So that's another thing. If you're just focusing on getting rid of the gluten,
yes,
I might have a bit of rice that night, no big shakes, but it's an easy one. Everyone can have it. And Rosie will bring like a vegetarian curry. Kamal and Joss will bring like a meaty curry. I'll bring a meaty curry, and they'll be like dal, and there'll be like salads and bhajis and poppadoms and chutneys and fermented lime chutneys. It's so nutrient dense and delicious, and it can satisfy everyone. And I think that we have taken that group from being a bunch of weirdos that couldn't really go out to restaurants anywhere and get something decent, especially a dairy-free vegetarian, unless you want to have like a eggplant salad or something. There was not a lot in the pubs and restaurants for my friend, but this way we've really found a way to kind of celebrate our different tastes and come up with something really cheap and fun, and it's awesome. So and like I always think a roast dinner is a good one as well, like meat and veg and
100%.
spuds. You can't go wrong with that either, can you? For
There's not a lot of people who don't like a roast,
That's it. But it's as paleo and full gaps as it gets, right?
yeah, exactly. So a lot of the foods that people would probably be quite familiar with are well and truly fit the bill when we look at gaps and things like that as well.
Which is
a
good.
few things that you'd leave out. It's awesome.
Good.
Makes it nice and easy.
So before, Bec, you mentioned a meat stock challenge, and I know that the way that I got to working with you was on like a 10 days to reset your digestion, which was the start. And then I did the meat stock challenge, and then I did like a longer kind of 3-month program. And the way that I like working with you and Wellbelly Health is that it's so much contact. Like there's a support group, there's a chat on Zoom every week, and there's a like Telegram chat group, so you can be like, oh, does this sour cream look like it's all right? And is it all right to have this? And what about that? And it's just so much scaffolding. I felt like it was around the journey that you have, because any change that you make in health and dietary changes is quite overwhelming, and healing is quite it's an intense time. And I really found that really beneficial. So if people wanted to have more of that kind of approach versus, what I'd done in the past was go and see a naturopath once every 3 months and kind of fumble through on your own and just searching for stuff on Instagram, fumbling along. What are some of the ways that people could get to work with you?
Yeah, well, I work at Wellbelly Health Clinic with Elyse. We're a GAPS based clinic. So if you're interested in GAPS in any way, shape, or form, please, just drop us a line, and we're more than happy to answer questions. And that's pretty much, I suppose, one of the main ethoses. I hope I'm not, speaking out of line with Elyse here, but one of the ethoses of the clinic is that we provide that kind of support and really help people to understand what we're trying to do. And any dietary change is hard. So the more that we can support people through it, and especially when you're making foods that are super unfamiliar to you. So fermented foods isn't that for a lot of people. What do you mean I've got to put bacteria in this and let it sit on the bench for 24 hours? That feels like that's not a good thing, that kind of thing. And just being able to ask those questions, and they might feel like they're a silly question, but they're really not, because we want you to feel, comfortable and happy with the dietary changes you're making and things like that. We've got a couple of different ways we can work with you in that respect. So we do offer one-on-one appointments. We offer small group coaching as well, which is one of the programs that you did. And we have online courses. We have 10-day challenges. So there's the 10 days of gut healing, which is a meat stock challenge. And we have 10 days to kickstart digestion, which is more generally looking through the different parts of digestion and ways to support that. And we run these several times a year. They're quite the 10-day challenges are quite affordable.
Yeah, it's like under $100, isn't it? Like under 180.
Bucks.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, that's right. And we do, like you said, we do one call a day, one live call a day over those 10 days, where we answer people's questions, talk about a certain aspect of digestion or meat stock, depending on which course you're in. And then there's a Telegram group where you can ask all your silly questions and all your very clever questions as well, to sort of find out, what's your next step, or does this ferment look right? I've cooked my meat stock for 2 hours. Is that enough? Those sorts of questions. And we can talk you through, ways to, improve things, or let you know that that's okay. We love questions. The more questions, the merrier. We love having conversations with people about these sorts of things. So yeah, they're really great places to start. We have, I'm not sure when this podcast or this will come out, but we do have a Kickstart Digestion 10-day challenge coming up at mid-November. I think it starts the 20th of November. And then next year we'll have plenty more as well through Wellbelly Health.
Yeah, and there's a Primal Alternative discount code as well, which I will pop in the show notes, so you can get, I think it's 20% off, actually, 10 to 20% off. I'll have to double check, because I'm just finalizing that with Elyse. But so good, because it's already so affordable, and then you get that discount. And I really like the digestive one, because it talked you through like the mechanics of it, so you understood. Everyone says, "Oh, chew your food, swallow your liquids, and whatever." Chew your liquids and swallow your solids. Or like, yeah. But then when you actually find out why, and this is what's happening in this phase, and then that goes to that phase, and you're like, wow. And I was like, wow. And I was like telling everyone at dinner, you're like, and guess what? And tomorrow we're going to learn about the stomach. Yeah. And what happens when the food hits the stomach. It's just, I found it amazing. It was so good to understand all the different processes, because then you understand why you need to support that. And if you're not digesting, you're not chewing your food, if your stomach acid is low in your stomach, then no wonder you're going to end up with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, bloating, pain. It makes sense. It's amazing.
Absolutely. I know the digestion is incredible. And I love talking about it.
I geeked out on it. I loved it. So Instagram and Facebook at Bec the Naturopath, if anybody wants to follow Bec, she's lovely. And I want to send you a gift for being on the show. So I would love to send you a couple of Primal Alternative goodies, which are a really cool way to, if you're ditching the grains and you still want pizza and pastry and bread and cookies and what else have I missed out? Granola, cereals. It's an easy swap. Your Vegemite on toast, you can just have Primal Alternative toast.
That's it. Nutrient-dense toast. I like it. I like it. And then my dad can stop looking at me funny, because he's Italian and he still can't work out why I'm not eating gluten.
Yeah.
He's like, but bread.
Pasta,
Like, that's okay.
pasta.
That's it. Yeah.
So what have you tried anything from our range, and do you have any favorites, or shall I surprise you?
I love the fat and seedy loaf. That does make me very excited, with some avocado. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. And I did have it with bacon. Our last retreat, Well Belly had a retreat, and that was one of the things that was on offer. And I also very much like the granolas. I don't think I've tried much else actually. But yeah, they're fantastic. I've got my eye on your wraps, to be honest. I've been looking at them on the
They're
internet.
not starch free though, those ones.
That's maybe why I was sort of like, oh, maybe not yet.
Maybe not yet. Okay, well,
Yeah.
I'll send you some. Actually, no, I don't know if I can do it yet, but did you know, this is exciting, that we're doing a Well Belly granola? Did you know we're collaborating on a product? How cool is that? So
I did not know this. I'm excited.
So exciting. And it's just a genuine love, mutual brand, because Well Belly loves Primal Alternative, and it's perfect, it's a perfect match. So our low carb granola is completely GAPS friendly, apart from the fact that we use maple syrup as the sweetener.
Yeah.
And that's mostly because then it's plant-based, it's vegan, so it's a bigger market, for primalistas. But we're going to do a Well Belly variation that's going to have honey as the sweetener. So then it's going to be GAPS compliant. Exciting. How cool is that?
Yay! Oh, that's really good. And especially find it summertime, that's where people kind of struggle as well with like, what can I eat? I don't really feel like anything hot. So that granola would be incredible. I'll be telling all my clients about that.
Tell them. And it's going to be, be on the Well Belly shop. It's going to be available from Primalistas. It's going to be everywhere, which is going to be really good. Yeah, I'm moving into that, getting a bit bored of hot eggs and bacon, and I've just actually ordered some low carb granola from my local Primalista, and I've got my 24-hour yogurt, and I'm gonna and get some berries, because they're all coming into season, and that's just such a good breakfast for this time of the year.
That's a summer one for sure. Yum.
Amazing. Becky, thank you so much for being such an incredible guest. I really loved our chat. It's been so much fun.
It's been lovely talking to you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you so much. I've been so excited about talking to you all week.
Likewise. Thank you so much.